You live in the richest country on earth. And still, one broken ankle can become a credit card problem. One surprise bill can turn into a second job. In the last year measured, Americans borrowed an estimated $74 billion just to pay for healthcare. That is not bad budgeting. That is a system tax on being human. Now here is the twist. The same country that tells you to grind harder is quietly depending on a tiny Nordic nation to keep a much bigger system from breaking. Because in the Arctic power game, the United States needs Norway more than it admits. Norway has about 5 million people. The United States has hundreds of millions of people. So why is Norway hosting the kind of access deals, airfields, and naval infrastructure that can shape the entire NATO North? Here is the mystery you should hold until the final act. What does the Arctic have to do with your rent, your healthcare bill, and your time? Because the answer is not polar bears. It is power and leverage. It is money and logistics. It is security you are already paying for whether you see it or not. Chapter 1. The U.S. Pain Point versus Norwegian, Boring Stability. In America, the dream is upward mobility. For many people, the reality is fragility. Even with insurance, huge numbers of Americans report skipping care because of cost. That means the price tag is not just dollars. It is delay and risk. It is the quiet math of whether you get treatment or gamble. In Norway, the cultural flex is not hustle. The cultural flex is predictability. That predictability lowers stress and makes long-term planning possible. Now watch the parallel logic. The society that invests in stability at home often supports stability abroad. When systems are fragile, they snap under pressure. When systems are designed for shock, they absorb pressure. If your state capped surprise medical bills tomorrow, would that free up your life or would you expect costs to rise elsewhere? Tell me which one and tell me why in the comments. Chapter 2. The Arctic is not far away, it is the supply chain of security. Most Americans think Arctic means remote. Military planners think Arctic means routes. Those routes move submarines. Those routes move shipping. Those routes move reinforcements across the Atlantic. So the Arctic is not a postcard. The Arctic is a logistics problem. Norway sits near the action, close enough to matter and stable enough to trust. Norway also operates in conditions that break unprepared forces. That experience turns geography into leverage. Chapter 3. The Infrastructure Flex, Access Beats Ownership. Here is the hidden math the United States rarely says out loud. You do not need to own every base. You need access, logistics, and legal frameworks that make response fast. This is where Norway becomes more than a friendly ally. Norway becomes a platform. Because the SDCA is not just 4 sites anymore. It was expanded to 12 agreed facilities and areas across Norway. 12 agreed areas. This is not a guest room. This is the United States moving its entire Arctic wardrobe into Norway's closet. The list also tells you what the partnership optimizes for. It prioritizes airfields and air stations. It prioritizes fuel and logistics. It prioritizes training ranges and storage. The original 4 were the headline sites. Those sites were Evans, Ramsund, Rig, and Sola. Then the expansion adds 8 more locations. Those additions include Andoya and Bardufoss. Those additions include Hakonsvern and Orland. Those additions include Værnes and Cedarmoen. Those additions include the Osmarka Cave Complex and the Namsen Fuel Terminal. That is not symbolic friendship. That is hard infrastructure. Chapter 4. Mythbuster. Norway is protected for free. Here is a common American misconception. Norway freeloads off American security. That story feels emotionally satisfying. That story is also incomplete. Norway's position in the high north is not a luxury. Norway's position in the high north is a job. It is a frontline job with constant requirements. Norway hit the NATO 2% defense spending commitment in 2024. Norway's long-term plan signals continued ramping through the 2025 to 2036 window. So the real question is not who protects who. The real question is who makes protection possible at scale. Because in the north, scale is not population alone. Scale is geography plus access plus speed. That is why the United States keeps leaning in. Myth stamp graphic animation. Hard cut to winter exercise footage. Low rumble transition. Chapter 5. Energy stability is wallet stability. Now let's talk about dependency that hits your wallet through geopolitics. That dependency is energy stability. Norway remains a major supplier to Europe. In the post-Russian pipeline era, Norway sits around the 30 to 35% scale for EU plus UK gas consumption equivalents. When Europe is stable, global markets are calmer. When global markets are calmer, inflation pressure is lower. When inflation pressure is lower, your paycheck hurts less. That is the Arctic power game. Security, energy, and economics are braided together. If your utility bill dropped because your energy system got more stable, would you save that money or would you buy time back and work less? Pick one choice in comments. Chapter 6. The moment. Norway built a national shock absorber. Now for the Nordic reality that Americans either admire or resent. Norway built a national buffer. Not a motivational quote. Not a personal finance hack. A national mechanism. A sovereign wealth fund designed to turn a finite resource into long-term resilience. A fund run with constraints, rules, and political accountability. Here is the difference in mindset. In America, households build their own shock absorbers. In Norway, the country built one and then argued about how not to misuse it. It is not utopia. It is architecture. If you want receipts instead of vibes, subscribe to Nexora. We are not here to dunk on the American dream. We are here to test it against reality, country by country, system by system, until we find what actually buys a better life. I will be in the comments for the first 2 hours after this drops. Ask your hardest questions about the math. Chapter 7. The bridge. What Norway gives the US that money cannot instantly buy. Here is what the United States cannot instantly buy in the high north. You cannot buy geographic advantage overnight. Norway already has it. You cannot buy cold weather operational experience overnight. Norway already has it. You cannot buy pre-negotiated access overnight. That access is what the expanded SDCA footprint represents. You also cannot buy aligned incentives overnight. Norway lives next door to the pressure. That is why the US needs Norway more than it admits. This is not emotional dependence. This is systemic dependence. If you want the next Norway versus USA breakdown, subscribe now. We are mapping what changes quality of life when systems absorb shocks instead of dumping them onto individuals. So let's close the mystery from the beginning. What does the Arctic have to do with your rent, your healthcare bill, and your time? The Arctic is upstream. It shapes energy stability. It shapes alliance stability. It shapes inflation shocks. Those shocks decide whether your life feels like a treadmill or a plan. In the Arctic power game, why the US needs Norway more than it admits, the uncomfortable takeaway is simple. America is building a northern posture that leans on Norway's geography, infrastructure, and readiness. Meanwhile at home, millions still borrow money just to keep their bodies working. Different systems create different stress. The same reality still applies. Someone always pays. Here is your question of the day. Do you accept higher taxes if it guaranteed zero medical debt risk, but required long-term planning like Norway? Comment yes, plan it, or comment no, keep it flexible, and include your state. If you want the next episode in our Norway vs. USA series, watch the one on how boring rules change everyday freedom. Once you see the math, you cannot unsee it. If you want, I can also do a second compliance pass that enforces a stricter rule. Every bracketed production queue must also contain at least 3 words, including SFX and CTA lines, so nothing slips during editing.